So we're going to start with opening statements, and in this order, we're going to ask Amanda Fritz to start, Mary Nolan, and then Steve Novick. 3 minutes of opening statements in that order, and the question is, just tell us about yourself a bit, and then what makes a city family-friendly?
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. I'm Amanda Fritz. Mary and I are running for the same seat. Steve is running for the open seat. And I've had the pleasure of serving on your city council for the last 3 years. I'm the woman on the city council. I'm the 7th woman ever to serve on the Portland City Council in 160 years. And I'm originally from England. I actually went to an all-girls middle school, so that was a nice remembrance of that. Came here after college when I was 21, having met my husband-to-be while we were both working at a children's camp in New Jersey. We came to Portland in 1986, having decided it was going to be the best place to live and raise a family in the entire United States, and indeed it has been. Our 3 children are 25, 24, and 21. My youngest will graduate from college 2 days before the election, so we're hoping it's going to be a really good week for the Fritz family. It's important. What makes a city family-friendly is great neighborhoods, accessible, affordable housing, environmental... 1 minute already. Environmental protection and knowing that we have clean air and clean water and parks and sidewalks and basic services in our neighborhoods. That's what I focused on in my 3 years on the city council. Basic services, spending taxpayers' money wisely, and focusing on jobs and schools. Prioritizing, even in these tough times, sending money to our schools and working on the issues that I, as a working mother, care about and that I know many of you do too.
Thanks. Let's see if we can, how's that? My name's Mary Nolan. I want to thank Mother PAC and all the wonderful volunteers for putting this event together. It's a great opportunity for us to have a bit of an exchange so that you can learn more about us and we can hear the things that are most important to you. I've been representing Portland in the Oregon House of Representatives since 2001. In that time, I've really focused on improving lives for families, for young children, for women, for people who have called Oregon home. That's what I think is important for a state and for a city. We need a city where families can own a home and feel safe in their neighborhood, where their children can safely, comfortably walk from home to school, where they can come home to a family that has a job that lifts them up into the middle class and keeps them there. A place where they can enjoy art and recreation and pursue the kinds of dreams that make their lives rich and rewarding and something attractive to everybody. We also need a city that delivers results, that doesn't just study things and process things and argue about things and measure how bad things are, but a city that makes things better, that delivers results that you can count on, that your children can count on, that the families who live in your neighborhood can count on. That's what I want to do on the City Council, and I'd like your support in helping me do it.
Hi, I'm Steve Novick, and I'm running for City Council because I am hooked on Portland. And when I think about what makes a city family-friendly, I think about parks and playgrounds. I think about sidewalks that provide safe routes to school. I think about schools with great teachers and school buildings that are clean and safe and light and pleasant places to be. And that's why I spent some time last year raising money for the Portland School Bond, canvassing for the Park Rose School Bond, and I'll be spending some time between now and Election Day working to pass the David Douglas School Bond. I think about libraries. I think about transit for people who can't afford a car, so that parents can take their kids to OMSI and so that they can get to work and get back from work in a reasonable time and aren't taking too much time away from their kids just while they're commuting. I think about a Portland plan that remembers that we need to figure out where the child care centers are going to be. And I think about rules that provide for basic economic justice. I was proud to be the author of Oregon's minimum wage law, which we passed by initiative. It wasn't that hard, it's pretty short. And I hope that we have guaranteed paid sick leave throughout Portland before I get to the city council, but if we don't, I'd be happy to be part of the council that passes that. And as I rattle off all of these services, I realize that I'm talking about services that are responsibility not just of the city, but of the county, of TriMet, of Metro. And one of the things we need to do is have all these governments work together. And I know that many of you are mothers and you are used to trying to get people to play well together. And I ask for your help in ensuring that all these governments play nicely together too. Thank you.
Thank you all. For this next question, we're going to go in this order: Mary, then Steve, then Amanda. Was that an adjustment for Amanda's mic that you just did? Or Amanda, can we get you to scoot forward a little bit? When you talk, you were a little bit quieter than this.
I can't get any closer than this.
That sounds much better than the first answer. Great, thanks.
Can I do over then? Can I say it again?
I think we all did hear you fine. It just was a little bit quiet. The first question that was put forth by Family Forward Oregon and the Mother PAC, they asked a variety of parents for suggestions for questions and consistently heard that there's a shortage of childcare in the city. There are 2-year-long waiting lists in some cases, and what exists doesn't adequately meet the needs of working parents. I'm going to throw in here that I found out that PSU costs less than childcare in many cases. Parents tell us they pay too large a percentage of their wages on childcare, and they can't find childcare that's conveniently located to their workplace, and this obviously impacts employers who benefit when employees are focused on work instead of juggling childcare issues. So parents across the city need accessible, strategically located, affordable, and high-quality childcare. What can you do to make sure Portland makes childcare a priority? Again, Mary, then Steve, then Amanda.
Thanks, Emily. Let me talk first a bit about what I already have done. At the state level, I worked very hard and successfully to protect the employment-related daycare program, which provides funding for employment-related daycare so that parents of young children who are in jobs that don't have daycare as a benefit can still get top quality, well-licensed daycare subsidized through the Oregon personal income tax, provided by employees who are trained and dedicated to provide really good quality care. Because just any daycare shouldn't be good enough for anyone's child in Portland. We should have top quality daycare. That's one of the things I've already done. Second thing we can do is understand what motivates employers and help them provide either on-site daycare or assistance for families, for their employees to get daycare closer to home or somewhere that's convenient and good quality. In order to do that, you really have to have a good relationship with business owners. I've spent the last 6 months listening to business owners all over the city about what it is that makes their businesses successful and asking them how I can help them employ more Portlanders and provide a better, more rich diversity of benefits to help their employees be good parents as well. Continuing that dialogue will help us move forward. And then the last thing we can do to help with the availability and the affordability of daycare is to make sure that we're working together with the state licensing organizations to make sure that we're helping people who are operating daycare programs or want to open daycare programs in Portland to be able to get through the maze of forms and procedures that they need to do in order to be able to offer that important service. And simplifying that so that we can have people who are committed to good early childhood education able to get to the point where they can provide it for families who want it.
This is a tough question. A few years ago, I was working for a nonprofit that did some research on What are the best models in the country for providing various public services, including childcare? And we discovered that North Carolina actually was top of the heap. And North Carolina, through the state itself, subsidized childcare, and their goal was to ensure that no family had to spend more than 10% of its income on childcare. And they did that through a state subsidy. I don't know that we're going to get a new program from the legislature to ensure that. I don't know if we could pass a local child care levy to ensure that. I do think, as Mary said, that we should be going out to employers and trying to sort of draw a map of here's where people live, here's where people work in the city, here's where child care exists now, here's where it should exist, and seeing that if we could reach out to employers and ask them to voluntarily band together and say, okay, if we had a child care center in X place which would help your employees, would you be willing to contribute to it? Like I said, I don't know where we're going to get the public funding right now to expand child care. Every once in a while, I look at something the city was planning on spending money for and thinking, is there possibly a better use for that? I mean, it may be that given the recent legislative actions, we're not going to put a few $1 million of city money into a sustainability center. Now, I don't know if we really had the money for a sustainability center to begin with, but assuming we had that money, maybe that's an alternate use for the city to say, instead of spending $4 million in a sustainability center, we could use that to jumpstart affordable child care in various areas of the city.
So there are three main ways that the city government, am I projecting here? Microphones are all different. That's one of the things I've learned in 3 years. There are three main ways that the city government is involved in this. The first is in the use of our public buildings. We do have daycare in the city of Portland. The Portland building, I'm told that parents put their children down while they're still in the womb in order to be able to get space in there. So we can use our city buildings better. Steve mentioned the Oregon Sustainability Center. That was going to, and which I voted against. That was going to involve moving the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability out of the 1900 building, which we, the taxpayers, are still paying off, but it shortly will be paid off. It's currently half empty because of the decimation of the Development Services Bureau due to the recession and for various other reasons. So we could expand daycare right in our city buildings if we were intentional about that. We've just done a facility study, and I agree with Mary. We've done the study, now we need to move to action. Having been aware of what's been planned, we can now move forward. The second way is when we have subsidies in other buildings, particularly tax abatements. We're currently in the process of revising the regulations to set standards on what has to be provided in order to get a tax abatement. Childcare ought to be one of the listed public benefits, and that's something that you can be involved in advocating for. The proposal is going out to the community right now, and so I request that you come and advocate for that. And then the third way is in the way that we talk about childcare as if it's important, because it is important. And remember that we have employees in the city of Portland, both in our government and in our neighborhoods all over the city. So the third way that we address this issue is through planning and zoning. We spent 4 years and lots of money developing the Portland Plan, which does address family-friendly neighborhoods. So now we need to implement the Portland Plan by making sure that the zoning allows in-home businesses and more childcare uses in every single neighborhood, where some neighborhoods are completely residentially zoned. You couldn't put a commercial childcare facility in that. We need to implement the Portland Plan by rezoning. I was on the Planning Commission for 7 years and considered the council's expert on planning and zoning and on the Portland zoning code. I want to be on the council moving forward so that we make sure that our lofty goals that we have in the Portland Plan are implemented on the ground in Portland's neighborhoods.
Thank you. The next question, before I ask it, I just wanted to remind everybody, if you have your cards and you filled it out, you can hold that up and somebody will come get it for our second round of questions in just a minute. This next question deals with paid sick days. 40% of all private sector workers in Oregon and 80% of low-income workers lack access to a single paid sick day from their job. They don't have paid time off, vacation, or any other source of time off. They lack any single day to recover from illness, seek medical care, or stay at home with a sick child and be paid for that. Employees who lack paid sick time are concentrated in restaurant, retail, childcare, and home care industries, and these are obviously people who also have ongoing contact with the general public, which means their lack of access to sick days should be a general public health concern. Our neighbors to the north and south, Seattle and San Francisco, have recently passed ordinances that require employers to let employees accrue earned sick time, so all workers can recover from illness or take care of sick children without losing critical income or their jobs. A double-barreled question for the three of you. First, a yes or no. Do you support this? And second, what would you do to make Portland the next city to have this type of ordinance? For this question, we'd like to hear first from Steve Novick, then Amanda, and then Mary.
Well, I have to tell you that until folks from Mother PAC brought this issue to my attention, it just hadn't occurred to me that there's that many people that have no paid sick days, and I had not realized that there are cities that I think we like to think of as comparable that had given that right to employees and that we had not. So I will talk to, and I'm ashamed that I haven't done this already after hearing about this issue, I will talk to every member of the existing council about passing this legislation, and I hope that it gets done before I get there. And I'll point them to the statistics, as you already have done, that San Francisco and Seattle and Milwaukee and Washington, D.C. have not fallen into the sea because they passed this legislation. The warnings of the interest groups against it turn out not to be true. And if, for whatever reason, this does not come to pass in Portland before I get to the council, if I'm lucky enough to do that, then I will spend some time between now and January trying to ensure that when we get there, we have the votes.
Yes, I support this legislation. And in fact, I will go one step further. I learned from the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 555, the grocery workers at Safeways and Fred Meyer, who've endorsed me for this campaign, that they need something called first day sick leave. They're not allowed to take the sick leave that they've earned until they've been out for 3 days and have a doctor's note. So they can't call in sick one day with either a child being sick or themselves. I think we need to have comprehensive laws throughout the state to improve our sick time. I will act on this as I did with plastic bags. Now, if you remember, the city of Portland considered banning plastic bags in Portland in 2010. And I said to Mayor Adams, plastic bags are bad. I mean, they're bad for the environment, and we in Portland can do better than this. They're bad for the whole state. They're bad, actually, for the whole world. So we should ask the legislature to pass this law with as broad a scope as possible. So what the city of Portland did was we passed a resolution saying that we would ban plastic bags in Portland if the legislature didn't, giving some pressure on the legislature to make this statewide. If this legislation on sick time is a good thing for Portland, but it's also important for the entire metro region, and it's important statewide. So I would hope that the legislature would pick this up next year, that we would pass a resolution saying that if they don't, we will move forward with it in the city of Portland. But in general, I have advocated for passing good legislation with as broad a scope as possible. So I was really pleased when Multnomah County passed the laws banning poison in baby bottles. Multnomah County is bigger than Portland. We would have done it had they not, but since the legislature wasn't able to get that passed, now more children and families in the Multnomah County are protected than had Portland just done it ourselves. We are often criticized for being unfavorable to business and penalizing businesses with taxes and regulations. So the more we can make things statewide when they need to be statewide, it works for both passing legislation which works for more people and avoiding that Portland-only stigma that then we're bad for business because we happen to be doing the right thing or we're intentionally doing the right thing.
To the first part of your question, Emily, yes, I support the policy. It's consistent with policies that I helped enact at the state level to expand family leave programs and protections for workers, to be able to not only care for their children, take their children to a doctor's appointment or attend a school program for their children, but also to take care of their parents. I don't know if anybody else in the room is in the sandwich generation along with me, where we are taking care of our children, and many of us also taking care of our elderly parents who are needing more help from us. family needs to go across all those generations. And that's why I really worked very hard with my colleagues in the legislature to give families the opportunity to work and care for each other across all the generations, so that we didn't have to make choices between what's best for our families and holding on to a job that our families need so that we can pay the rent and buy food and pay for college. So bringing that forward is important, starting at the local level, which is often the way things work in Oregon. Portland has been, and I hope will continue to be, the leading progressive movement, the leading progressive force in the state of Oregon. We invent it here, we show how it's successful, and then it's adopted and it kind of morphs out over the rest of the state. I think we should continue to do that with this issue, with other issues. I'll close by saying I've worked in private business, I've talked with employers, I've started a business that Portland families depended on for their own paycheck, for their own health care benefits, for their own appropriate sick leave and support for their families. So I know how to do this from a business point of view and have the credibility to talk with other business owners to make them our partners so that we do this together instead of at odds with each other.
Thank you. The next question has to do with the economy and air pollution. Everyone wants Portland's economy to get back to work, but under current laws, air pollution here rises when the economy does as well. That meant that there was almost 10% more air pollution in Portland in 2010 than in 2009. And there's no foreseeable limit, since many of the biggest polluters are playing by rules established almost 50 years ago that don't fully consider the health impacts of pollution, such as asthma and cancer. These are legal emissions that we're talking about, toxic at the same time. And that means that the air at, for example, 35 Portland schools is ranked among the worst 5% in the nation. And it doesn't include vehicle pollution at all. Not one single Portland school ranks better than the bottom 30% of schools in the nation. We know that the state plays an important role in air quality regulation, but the city can't just blame the state, or maybe it can, and hope it'll do something. What would you do, though, to make a different choice? What would you do to help reduce industrial air emissions in the city? I'd like to ask Amanda to address this first, and then Mary, and then Steve. And just a quick reminder, if you do have questions on your cards, raise them up, because the next round of questions will come from the audience contributions. Amanda, please.
There is a challenge with city regulations and state regulations and which trumps. And for this term, for my first term, I have watched Mary in the Northwest District working with EBSCO to come to an agreement, and did an amazing job on that. It shouldn't rely on neighbors to have to negotiate with business owners, and it shouldn't rely on business owners to be willing to negotiate in order for us to have clean air to breathe. I'm willing to push the limits in my second term. I asked the city attorney when Mary first approached me, is this something that the city can regulate? And the answer was no. Having gotten under my belt some successes in challenging both regulations and sometimes the city attorney's advice and being willing to risk, I'm willing to go further in my second term and to coordinate a citywide effort to look at air quality with our neighborhoods. I've been the commissioner in charge of neighborhood involvement for 3 years, and I hope I will be for the next 5. And this affects every neighborhood. It shouldn't depend on those with volunteer capacity to be able to work with businesses. We should do a citywide process to do this. As we all know, we've been struggling with the recession, and people have been working hard just to keep the roofs over their head and their kids' homework's done, and the things that have been most challenging over the last 3 years. And we haven't had city staff capacity to help with a project like this when we've cut 10% from the city budget pretty much over the last 3 years, and have focused on providing basic services to neighborhoods. This is a basic service, however, and it's clear to me that it's something that does need a coordinated citywide approach. I'm the commissioner who's been back to all of the neighborhoods since I was elected in all of the neighborhoods. I won every single precinct in 2008, and I didn't want to be the politician who just comes back once every 4 years to ask for your vote. So I've been volunteering in Portland's neighborhoods for the last 3 years. I know people in all the neighborhoods, and I will work together with both the leaders and those whose voices have not been heard in the past to make sure that together we push for these changes, whether it's at the city level, at the state level, at the federal level. This needs to change.
As you pointed out in the question, air quality is an environmental issue that does not know any political boundaries, doesn't know neighborhood boundaries, affects the entire airshed, and is appropriately largely managed by the state DEQ. We have laws on the books for DEQ to set and enforce strong air quality standards. For years, in the late 90s and early 2000s, the Republican majorities in the Oregon legislature knew that they couldn't get away with lowering those standards and letting businesses have a buy. So what they did instead was not give DEQ any money to enforce the laws. They didn't have the engineers, they didn't have the scientists on staff to go out and enforce the laws. When I was co-chair of the state's budget committee in the legislature, I dramatically increased the funding for scientists and public health experts at the Department of Environmental Quality so they could do that, so they could monitor businesses, and not just in order to regulate and punish, but to give them technical advice on how they can most effectively meet the air quality and water quality and land quality standards that we all want to live in. Things work much more effectively if we can do this combining good science, good public health understanding, and a cooperative approach that supports businesses who provide middle-class jobs for our neighbors while also protecting our neighborhoods, our schools, our parks and recreation areas, and our open space. Portland needs to use its budget in a way that also prioritizes this, so that we provide both the scientific and public health evaluation that supports businesses, but we also aren't afraid to use a hammer if we need to. When I was Director of Environmental Services for the City of Portland, part of my responsibility included the regulation and permitting of industries. And we helped lower discharges into our streams and creeks, into the rivers from industry, and we helped lower the amount of air pollution that was put out, even without having direct authority to do that, because we built bridges with the folks at DEQ, and we understood the way the businesses operate so that we could help them succeed, continue to employ people, and meet our environmental standards.
I used to enforce environmental laws for the Federal Justice Department, working as the lawyer for EPA. We did Superfund and clean water and clean air cases, and environmentally, in terms of public health, I think that the air cases were the most important. Mm-hmm. I'm proud to have recovered $129 million from Occidental Chemical to pay the taxpayers back for the cost of cleaning up Love Canal, but I'm actually more proud of getting an injunction against General Dynamics to stop air pollution in the Fort Worth, Texas area, even though that meant that Cowboys fans got to breathe cleaner air. So I recognize this is critically important. I'm glad you're focusing on it. I do think that, neighborhood efforts can succeed. I do think that sometimes public officials, even when they don't have the legal authority to call on to force corporations to change their practices, they do sometimes have the moral authority. And I think that public pressure can change behavior. I'm now going to say something that this is a half-baked idea. And some people might think that it's a silly idea. And it's something that will require a lot of work. But a lot of our major corporations are now very concerned about the Portland Harbor Superfund site, and some of them feel like they might be called upon to pay a $2 billion bill in order to address what they think are minimal or exaggerated health and environmental concerns. There's other folks who would say no. I mean, cleaning up the Portland Harbor as much as humanly possible is critically important. And I've had conversations with the Communities of Color Coalition, including some communities that do some subsistence fishing, and they've said, don't discount the possibility. There's a lot of people who either do now or would like to eat a lot of bass and carp and catfish from the polluted part of the harbor. And I think we need to have a discussion about this, but one idea I'd like to talk to the corporations and to the affected communities about is, could we come to a community agreement as a community that we will advocate to EPA for a cleanup of the harbor where the cleanup is needed that might cost significantly less than $2 billion, but have those same companies pay into some sort of fund to address if we conclude that there are more pressing health and environmental issues related to pollution, to address those issues, to pay for more emission controls for toxic air emissions, for example. Like I said, this is a half-baked idea. I have not had all the conversations that I should have, but it seems to me that we have one big potential bill that a lot of our major employers are going to pay for Superfund. If it's possible to advocate for a somewhat less expensive Superfund cleanup, but get in return a fund to pay for cleaning up the air, I'd like to think that's something that's worth considering.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to turn to the audience audience questions portion. Some of these questions have been submitted ahead of time, and some from today, pulling out the major themes. We're going to start, though, with a question that Daniel Golkowitz has posed, a 12-year-old member of our city, and he'll go ahead.
Okay.
I can hold the mic for you.
Okay. Do you think that the Portland parks can be more maintained, like all the water and mud and not dirt or graffiti in the parks, and also a little cleaner? And also, can you help the grass grow so it's not just weeds?
You got 2 minutes to respond, and we're going to start with Mary, and then Steve, and then Amanda.
It's a really important question. Thanks for thinking about it, and thanks for asking us, and thanks for having the courage to stand up in front of all these people and say what's important to you. Yes, I do think that the Portland parks can be better maintained. I probably can't help much because as much as I try to do gardening my own, I don't have any green thumbs at all. But I do know enough to call on people who are really good at it. And the people who work in the Portland Parks Bureau know their jobs. They're very good at it. They care a lot about the value that the parks and the playgrounds and the community centers and the public swimming pools have for neighborhoods. You like to go down there and play in the park, right? And you want it to be someplace safe. You want it to be someplace that your friends can feel good about going down and shooting hoops or playing softball or whatever you want to do there. I think you deserve to have parks that you feel comfortable in, that you can safely walk to and from your home, and I want to work on making that possible for you.
I think that's very important, and I would really like us to do a better job of maintaining the parks. That costs money, and the city doesn't have very much money. In fact, they're cutting back on bureaus like the parks, and I'd like to be able to say that there are other things that are a lot less important that we could cut in order to fully fund the parks. But what the city spends most of its general fund on is police and fire, and the parks, I think, are the third biggest thing. And I think a lot of people we said we're going to totally prioritize the parks and not spend anything on those other things. I mean, the parks certainly are important, you shouldn't discount them, but it is hard to see where you come up with the money. Personally, I would like to see a reform to our statewide tax system which limits the amount of money the city has for those services, particularly something called Measure 47/50 that was passed 15 years ago that has really hampered local governments and schools. But another thing we need to do is just have a stronger economy, because if you have a stronger economy, then the city collects more revenue from its business taxes, for example, and has more to spend in everything, including parks. And nobody up here has a quick fix on how to turn the economy around. Personally, I think that we can focus a lot on strengthening our businesses and our families and the city's finances by having a citywide strategy to control healthcare costs, because healthcare costs strangle our economy, and we spend more in this country than any other country on healthcare and don't get enough back. And if you wanted to go to my website, which is novickforportland.org, you'll see that there's some strategies that have been used in other parts of the country that I think are worth following. That's my particular little economic development strategy. But right now, I mean, it is hard because money's short. And thanks for the question.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for wearing an Oregon Duck sweatshirt. Do you remember when we won the Rose Bowl? That was really cool. There are some services that the city provides that only city workers can do, police and building inspections and those kinds of things. There are others that we, the citizens of Portland, can help with. I was a citizen volunteer for 20 years before I got on the council, and we have the second highest volunteering rate of any city in the nation. One of my goals for my second term is to make us #1. So there are some things that you can do to help out in our parks to do the weeding. We have 3 pesticide-free parks, and partly what we have to learn is that maybe some of those weeds are not that bad. If you can still play soccer on the field, it doesn't perhaps matter if there's a dandelion or 2. So that's part of it. And then the other thing is that we do have $3 million worth of volunteers in Portland's parks every year doing things like pulling ivy and working together to make our parks better. Another thing that we've done to prioritize in the last 3 years, though, is recognizing that there are some parts of Portland that don't have any parks at all, whether they're muddy or weedy or not. So my council, with Commissioner Fish's lead, has put money into buying properties in Southwest Portland, in deep Southwest Portland, and in East Portland, where they don't have any parks at all. We don't have the money to develop them until we can maybe work on a parks bond, but we need to buy the properties before they get developed so that future kids will have a park in their neighborhood that they can walk to. And so I encourage you to join. You don't have to be any particular age to volunteer in Portland's parks, and so you've noticed the problem, and I hope you'll step up and be part of the solution, because we can all work together. That's what Portlanders do the best, and that's been the silver lining, if there has been one, of this recession, that we've realized we have to work together. We're all in this together, and if we're not all doing well, then none of us are doing well.
Thank you. And Daniel, thank you very much for the question. A couple more questions. Asking them will be members of the Mother PAC board. Renee is first, and she'll read the question. For this question, we will start with Steve and then ask Amanda to respond, and then Mary, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer this question. Renee?
Okay, so this is a question from the audience. The PDC is collecting almost $100 million in property taxes this year. That's money that the county, city, and schools forgo, and more than double the spending 10 years ago. For PPS, it means the PDC, not our schools, got $9 million from the local option voters passed last May. That's enough to hire a librarian, art, or music teacher at every school. What will you do to reduce the impact of urban renewal to county, city, and school services our families count on?
That's a really tough question, because the $100 million a year that the city is spending, which equals, according to the auditor, about 24 cents of every property tax dollar collected in the city, that's mostly to pay off the debt from projects that we've already done. So we can't, deny the debt. We can't not pay that off. I think that, going forward, I'd be very leery of any new urban renewal proposals for exactly that reason. Urban renewal, like you say, has diverted money from core city services. It's also played a role in gentrification and the displacement of poor people and people of color from neighborhoods where they used to live. There was an interesting comment in an article on the auditor's report a few months ago by City Commissioner Dan Saltzman, who said, I don't think as we made these decisions one by one, we really thought hard about the impact on the general fund. And there was an interesting comment by former City Commissioner Gretchen Kafori, perhaps the cutest city commissioner in Portland history, who's here today, who in the Oregonian article about gentrification, urban renewal and gentrification said, we thought we were doing a good thing. So I think that in the future, I'd be very leery of new urban renewal districts. I think that there might be a possibility, and something you need to do more research on, of the districts that we already have that have been extended out into the future, to the extent that we haven't already issued bonds to continue borrowing money to invest in those districts, can we stop and say no more? But I do think that urban renewal, there's neighborhoods that look nicer now than they used to look. But urban renewal, by definition, is a tool which only works somewhere. It takes money from everywhere and focuses it somewhere. And given that Portland, over the years, has fallen further and farther behind other cities we like to think of as comparable economically, I'm not sure it's been the best economic development tool.
So I work hard to spend taxpayers' money wisely in every single decision that I make. And I work hard to be collaborative with the rest of the council and with the county. So we've worked with the county to revise the regulations at the state level to divide up the tax increment financing money. And we also worked with the county recently, and it's still in process, on the tax abatements for multifamily housing and single-family housing, figuring out together what's the appropriate level of subsidy to reach the gains that we want to get. Because let's remember that that urban renewal money pays 30% of it goes for affordable housing, helping families stay in Portland and helping our neighborhoods continue to be mixed use and to have mixed income levels. So there has been urban renewal, and tax abatements are a tool that it's important to use strategically. That's what I've done. I may or may not vote for the proposed urban renewal district that's coming up around the Portland State University. I always wait and hear what citizens have to say, because we make these decisions together. It's a balancing of competing interests. There isn't always the same answer. But there is one basic answer, which is the one that Steve gave earlier. We need to fix measures 5, 47, and 50. The funding of services in the state of Oregon has been broken since my child, who's going to graduate from college, 21 years old, it's been broken since we passed Measure 5. And the legislature needs to step up and fix that, because we can do all the Band-Aids we want and all the shuffling of the deck, the rearranging of the deck chairs on the Titanic, but until we fix that fundamental problem, we're always going to not have enough money to fund the things that we, the citizens of Portland, would like to be able to fund but are not able to because of those limitations. We should get that changed.
I'm going to take a slightly different tack on this question, because Portland Development Commission, and now Portland Development Commission and the new Portland Bureau of Housing, which used to be included within PDC, have a couple of broad responsibilities and have delivered real value to Portlanders through affordable housing, through the siting of facilities where people can create businesses that employ Portlanders and give them middle-class incomes that can support their families. Urban renewal works by capturing the increase in property taxes when an area that had been vacant becomes redeveloped and starts paying property taxes. The River District, that had been abandoned warehouses and underutilized properties, by investing in the roads and the water and the other infrastructure to support development, we move from an area that paid several $million in property taxes a year to an area that is now paying $20 and $30 million a year in property taxes, much of which, as Steve said, goes to pay back the bonds to build those streets and put those sewers in. But beyond the property taxes that are now paid in that district, there are jobs that didn't exist. There are families who have a paycheck and health care. And while we need to be very careful about how we do that and make sure we're providing enough emphasis on affordable housing, I wouldn't want to completely lose our ability to renovate and rehabilitate neighborhoods all over the city.
Thank you all. We have one more question from the audience, and then we'll have closing statements. And just to whet your appetite, there are refreshments for sale during the break. Mary Pivito, pardon me, another member of the Mother PAC board will read this question.
And we're doing a 1 minute response?
Oh, and pardon me, and we're going to have to cut the responses to 1.5 minutes, if you wouldn't, just to get our scheduled time, end on our scheduled time.
Thank you. So this is a question that actually we saw quite a few come in our questionnaire, as well as a person from the audience who has a 4-year-old child and is concerned about, though they know the limitations of city government in terms of direct control over city schools, the educational outcomes, though, of our students and the quality of our public schools have a direct impact on the livability, city services, crime rates, property values, and a host of other very relevant city concerns that affect all residents. So the question is, what will you do to work with the 6 Portland school boards to ensure that our kids are receiving an equitable, top-notch education from safe, stably funded schools?
And I don't think I told you who to start with, but we'll start with Amanda, and then go to Mary, and then Steve.
I will support candidates for the legislature who will actually fix the fundamental problem. And I will continue doing what I've done on the city council in supporting schools to the extent that we're allowed to. We have coordinated between those 6 school districts in Portland and in Multnomah County, setting for the first time all the players at the table to figure out those issues of equity, funding, support from all of the jurisdictions in Multnomah County. I'm really proud of that, and it's already getting results. 5% increase in Portland Public Schools. The second thing I will do is to encourage that mother of a 4-year-old to send your child to your local Portland Public School, whether it's in Portland Public Schools 1J or Park Rose or Reynolds or David Douglas or wherever. We have great schools, and my kids are living proof of that. We have wonderful teachers who just need the support, and sometimes it's this relatively small amount of city support that makes a huge difference, like at Roosevelt High School, where in the midst of the recession, your city council put $200,000 towards their athletics stadium, and all other kinds of wraparound help from the businesses, from the community there, myself going out to their events and cheering. You know, sometimes you just need a cheerleader. You need to know that the city council cares, and that's what I do. At Roosevelt, we had a 14% increase in graduation rates last year, and they had 100 more kids apply to be freshmen there than the previous year. We know how to do this. We've seen closing the achievement gap in Centennial. We need to work together to keep doing more of the same.
We do need to push the legislature to do more for all of our public schools, which, as I said earlier, is why when I was co-chair of the state's budget committee, we approved the largest state investment in K-12 schools in our history under my gavel. We also doubled the amount of funding for early childhood education, Oregon Head Start, and made college scholarships available to part-time students, which is the way most community college students get their education, because they have to work at least part-time while they're going to school. Those are the things I did on my own initiative, delivering the actual results. Now, on the city council, we do have 6 local school districts who serve Portland children. I was on the finance committee for the Portland Public Schools bond measure last spring. We managed to get the operating levy approved, and by doing that, saved hundreds of teachers' jobs that wouldn't be there if we hadn't succeeded there. We didn't get the bond measure to improve the schools so that the physical plant of schools like Tubman could be improved and welcoming as well as safe. But there will be another opportunity for that. I supported the Park Rose school bond measure, which did pass by just a handful of votes. And with Steve, I'll be out there promoting the David Douglas School District bond measure this year. But the other thing we can do, as I said, is make it safe and comfortable and healthy for kids to be able to get to their schools all over town.
The city isn't in a position to replace the tens of millions of dollars a year that the schools have lost to the combination of Measure 5 and Measure 47, and the fact that the legislature decided, for some good reasons, to start redistributing school money from formerly rich districts like at least PPS, maybe some of the other Portland districts, to the rest of the state. I would like to see the city, just as the city has stepped forward and done Dan Saltzman's children's levy to pay for some extra social services for kids, I'd like to see the city come up with a small pot of money to pay for targeted investments like school board member Bobby Regan's idea that we arrange for every 6th grader and every 7th grader and every 8th grader to at least visit a college so they know that one's like. Take every 6th grader to a PCC campus, every 7th grader to PSU, every 8th grader to either the U of O or OSU. I think we can come up with a small pot of money to do that. But we also do need to change the tax structure in this state. We do need to change Measure 4750, which disconnected property values from real market values from assessed values. I think politically there's a possibility to do that, and we need to constantly tell people we have disinvested in our schools. 20 years ago, we spent 4.7% of gross state product on K-12. Now it is 3.8%. That is billions of dollars less we're spending on schools as a percentage of the economy, and we need to turn that around.
Thank you all. We're now going to go to closing statements, a minute and a half each. We'll go in this order: Mary, and then Steve, and then Amanda.
Thank you again for hosting this, and thank you for being here. I'm running for City Council because I want to improve lives of Portlanders, and particularly Portland families. My daughter is a Latina, and she and other Latina teenagers like her don't need a study that tells her how badly stacked against her the decks are. My nephew is an African American, and like other young black men, he doesn't need to know that statistically he's more likely to go to jail or prison than to college. They both need leaders who will take on very, very hard challenges and deliver results now, not 5 years from now, not sometime after we've done another study. I helped negotiate the terms of the Healthy Kids program that provided funding for preventative health care for 80,000 children, about 15,000 of them living here in Portland. I know how to put together tough, important, critical programs, and I'd like your support in bringing that kind of skill, enthusiasm, and passion to the Portland City Council. Thank you.
First, I'd just like to do a shout out to a few people in the audience: my girlfriend Rachel, my campaign manager Beth and her family, former County Commissioner Serena Cruz Walsh, and my friend Caitlin Baggett, known far and wide as the Wascally Baggett. I'm running for City Council because I love this city, and there's a couple of big things I want to work on. I encourage you to go to my website, novickforportland.org, and look at the details. One thing, as I mentioned earlier, is I think that we can make Portland a leader in the country in reducing healthcare costs, which strangle businesses, governments, and families. And there's a model that's been pioneered by, of all things, the Atlantic City Casino Workers Union, where they've worked with their folks who are the most high healthcare cost folks, to take better care of themselves, kind of a supercharged wellness program. And they've discovered that doing that has saved significant amounts of money. Other businesses around Atlantic City have come and joined this network that's doing that, and it's making a big difference. It might sound kind of abstract and wonky, but I think it's critically important if we're going to have a strong economy to get a handle on healthcare costs, and I think the city can forge partnerships with other public and private sector employers and unions in doing that. Another thing we spend too much money on in this state is prisons. We spend too much in prisons, not enough on prevention, and that's one of the reasons our police spend a bunch of their time acting as first responders to what are really mental health crises. And I proposed a plan that I've discussed with the governor and Chair Kogan to make a deal with the state where if we send fewer people to their prisons, they can send us the savings back to spend on prevention. Thank you very much.
When I ran for city council in 2008, I had been a volunteer in Portland's public schools for 17 years and had worked at OHSU in psychiatric nursing for 22 years. And people said, oh, she's just a mom. She's just a nurse. What does she know about city government? Well, I'd been on the Planning Commission for 7 years, so I did know quite a lot about city government, and I'd been volunteering all over Portland's neighborhoods, so I knew a lot about that too. I'm running for re-election because I've done what I said I was going to do in spending taxpayers' money wisely and focusing on jobs and schools. I met a man last night, a resident of one of the downtown condos, who said to me, I don't follow politics very much, but I kind of think that you're the voice of common sense and you're the fiscally responsible one on the council. Do I have that right? And I said, yeah, that's about right. I saved the ratepayers $6 million in 2009 by choosing a less expensive method of treating Bull Run water if we have to. I've continually looked at every single item on the city council agenda and into the details of them, saving $2 million here and $2 million there, wherever possible, or even $50 here or there, because every dollar of taxpayers' money needs to be spent providing services to citizens, and that's what I do. I want to close by giving a shout out to the young people in the audience here. My children attended many meetings like this, and they were never as well behaved as you have been. Out all right. They graduated from Portland Public Schools. One of them is now a teacher at Madison High School, or would like to be if there were any jobs there. And the other two are doing just fine too. So keep investing your time, your money in your neighborhoods, your public schools, and please help me win re-election. Thank you.
All right, thank you all very much. 3 candidates, Amanda Fritz, Mary Nolan, and Steve Novick.